The young and the restless spoilers shock in the simmering heat of a Genoa summer. As shadows lengthened and danger lurked behind every corner, Victor stepped into a role he never truly asked for, a guardian amid a city spiraling into chaos. Once the bastion of order, Genoa had slowly crumbled after Paul and Ray's departure. The streets that had once whispered promises of safety now echoed with the menace of unsolved kidnappings. The local police, overwhelmed and disorganized, were powerless in the face of mounting criminal activity. In this tumult, even chance, once a trusted aid, was only seen as a temporary patch, far from capable of taking up the mantle of a true police chief. Victor's determination was palpable. His eyes, hardened by years of navigating the labyrinthine networks of crime and corruption, fixed on a new target. The culprit, he declared without hesitation, was none other than Aristotle Dumas, a man whose origins in Los Angeles had always marked him as an outsider in Genoa. But Aristotle's influence ran deep. His connections with notorious figures like Damien and Hold'em only deepened the suspicions surrounding him. Living in the same city as his criminal accomplices, Dumas had managed to weave a web of illicit activities that had finally ensnared two innocent souls, Phyllis and Sharon, who had become the latest victims in a string of kidnappings. Victor's plan was as clear as it was ruthless: track down Dumas and deliver a lesson that would resonate as a warning to all who dared disrupt the fragile balance of power in Genoa. His quest was more than a mere act of retribution. It was a statement of defiance against a society that had allowed itself to be overrun by lawlessness. Yet, as with every tale of heroism and vendetta, layers of mystery began to accumulate. Among the whispered rumors that crisscrossed the darkened alleys of Genoa, one name emerged with an unsettling frequency: Ian Ward. Some of the more persistent observers noted an odd detail: a fleeting moment when Ian, while boarding an ambulance to rush to the hospital, had opened his eyes, his gaze lingering with an enigmatic spark. What had seemed like a minor, almost incidental act in a moment of crisis soon took on the air of a portentous clue. Could it be that Ian Ward, often dismissed as an ordinary man caught in extraordinary circumstances, was more deeply entwined with the unfolding mystery than anyone had previously suspected? The ambiguity surrounding Ian Ward was no accident. A master storyteller, the writer behind these events had long enjoyed planting seeds of doubt and wonder in the minds of fans. With deliberately open-ended details, such as Ian's mysterious behavior in the ambulance, the narrative allowed room for speculation, inviting viewers and readers alike to ponder the true nature of his involvement. It was a classic move, teasing the possibility of his return or reappearance in a later twist, without ever fully committing to one theory or another. Victor's relentless pursuit of Aristotle Dumas was driven by a personal code of justice, a belief that no one should be allowed to prey upon the vulnerable under the shroud of bureaucratic failure. As he navigated the treacherous underbelly of Genoa, Victor's path was fraught with danger, betrayal, and unexpected alliances. Each lead brought him closer to Dumas, yet the labyrinth of corruption was intricate and deceptive. The connections between Dumas, Damien, and Hold'em painted a portrait of a criminal syndicate whose reach extended into every facet of city life. They were not merely isolated miscreants, but part of a well-organized network that thrived on the city's instability. With every encounter, Victor unearthed clues that hinted at a larger, more sinister conspiracy. His investigations took him deep into the dark heart of Genoa's criminal world, where trust was as scarce as sunlight in the dead of winter. In one tense confrontation, Victor found himself face-to-face with one of Dumas's lieutenants in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with the smell of oil and decay, and every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. The lieutenant, trembling under Victor's unyielding stare, muttered fragments of information that implicated not only Aristotle Dumas but also hinted at the potential involvement of figures like Ian Ward. Despite the mounting evidence against Dumas, the specter of doubt regarding Ian Ward loomed large in the public consciousness. How could a man who had seemingly acted with urgency, rushing towards a hospital in an ambulance, be implicated in such a heinous crime? To some, it was a perfect red herring, a distraction engineered by the writer to keep the audience guessing. The enigmatic expression on Ian's face, observed during that fateful moment, was a tantalizing detail left to fuel endless debate among fans and critics alike. It was as if the narrative itself was daring its audience to challenge the official version of events, to look beyond the obvious and consider alternative explanations. As Victor's investigation progressed, the stakes escalated dramatically. Each new piece of evidence not only tightened the noose around Aristotle Dumas but also began to weave Ian Ward's character into the broader tapestry of intrigue. In clandestine meetings, whispered conversations in smoky backrooms, and covert surveillance operations, the names of these two men were repeatedly mentioned in the same breath, each representing a different facet of Genoa's descent into lawlessness. Victor's personal vendetta was more than just a mission to save Phyllis and Sharon. It was a stand against an emerging order where power was wielded by those who operated above the law. His pursuit was relentless, driven by a mix of personal grief, a sense of duty, and a burning desire to restore order. The urgency in his mission was palpable. Every minute that Phyllis and Sharon remained in the clutches of their captors was a minute in which the moral fabric of Genoa was further torn asunder. In a city where corruption and chaos reigned supreme, Victor's campaign against Dumas was emblematic of a larger struggle, a battle between anarchy and order, between the opportunistic exploitation of weakness and the timeless quest for justice. Even as Chance, the interim law enforcement figure, struggled with the limitations of his authority, Victor's uncompromising resolve shone like a beacon of hope. His actions, bold and decisive, ignited a spark of resistance among those who had long been resigned to living in fear. The story, however, was far from a simple tale of good versus evil. It was a narrative layered with moral ambiguities, where every character, from the enigmatic Ian Ward to the shadowy Aristotle Dumas, embodied the complex interplay of intentions and consequences. The writer's deliberate choice to leave certain threads unresolved, most notably Ian Ward's mysterious behavior, ensured that the audience remained engaged, their imaginations ignited by the possibilities of what might yet unfold. In one particularly gripping sequence, Victor cornered one of Dumas's operatives in a narrow alley, the flickering neon signs overhead casting long, distorted shadows. The operative, under duress, revealed that Dumas had orchestrated a network of kidnappings as a means to destabilize Genoa and seize control of the city's underground. His confession, laced with fear and regret, painted a damning picture of a man who would stop at nothing to secure his power. But even as this revelation bolstered Victor's case against Dumas, the specter of Ian Ward's involvement continued to haunt the investigation, a reminder that in the murky world of crime and retribution, nothing was ever entirely black and white. The public debate over Ian Ward's potential culpability added another layer of intrigue. Social media buzzed with theories, and passionate discussions erupted in local cafes and online forums. Some argued that the incident with the ambulance was nothing more than a coincidental lapse, a momentary distraction in an otherwise commendable act of duty. Others believed it was a subtle clue planted by a mastermind intent on misleading the authorities. The ambiguity of Ian's actions allowed the narrative to evolve organically, keeping fans on edge and fueling a cycle of speculation that seemed destined to endure. As the pursuit of Aristotle Dumas reached its fevered pitch, Genoa itself became a character in the drama, a city defined by its resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity, yet simultaneously marred by its vulnerabilities. Victor's crusade was not merely a solitary fight, it was a rallying cry for all those who refused to be cowed by the encroaching darkness. With each step closer to Dumas, Victor edged nearer to the truth, a truth that was as convoluted as it was compelling, demanding sacrifices and challenging the very notion of justice. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, a confrontation that promised not only to expose the true mastermind behind the kidnappings but also to unmask the hidden agendas of those once thought to be mere bystanders. Victor's journey was one of moral complexity and unyielding determination, a quest to restore balance to a city teetering on the brink of chaos. In the midst of the ensuing maelstrom, the ambiguous figure of Ian Ward lingered, a wild card in a narrative already brimming with twists and turns. Ultimately, the story of Genoa in these turbulent times was far from over. As Victor vowed to track down Aristotle Dumas and deliver his own brand of justice, the open-ended mystery surrounding Ian Ward ensured that the narrative would continue to evolve, keeping the audience in a perpetual state of anticipation. It was a tale designed not only to entertain but to provoke thought, urging each viewer to consider the nuances of morality and the blurred lines between heroism and villainy. In a world where certainty was elusive and every shadow concealed a potential threat, Victor's crusades symbolized a defiant stand against the tide of corruption. And as the echoes of his footsteps resonated through the darkened streets of Genoa, one thing remained clear: the fight for justice was far from over, and every revelation was just another step toward an uncertain, yet inevitable, reckoning. In the simmering heart of Genoa, a city once admired for its order and sophistication, a storm was gathering. The persistent hum of unease in the streets had reached a fever pitch since the days when Paul and Ray were at the helm of its security. Now, with law enforcement stretched thin and plagued by a string of inexplicable kidnappings, Genoa was a powder keg waiting to explode. Victor, ever the vigilant guardian, found himself in the eye of this maelstrom. It was clear to him that something far more insidious was unfolding behind the chaos. At the center of this intricate web stood Aristotle Dumas, a man with ambitions that far surpassed his shadowy beginnings in Los Angeles. Dumas wasn't content with merely operating in the underworld, he envisioned himself as a dominant force, a true power broker in Genoa. His letters, sent in a series of carefully crafted missives to Victor, were as elegant as they were menacing. In these correspondences, Dumas outlined his grand ambitions: to rise to power by any means necessary and to reshape the city's power structure. His ultimate goal was to dismantle the existing order by eliminating key figures, most notably Jack and the entire Jabot faction, whose influence, however respectable, stood in the way of his vision for a new Genoa. Victor read each letter with a mix of curiosity and caution. There was an undeniable allure in Dumas's confidence and his meticulously plotted plans, which painted a picture of a city purged of its old guard. In many ways, Victor was drawn to the raw ambition behind Dumas's words. The idea of a radical upheaval, of cleansing Genoa's entrenched corruption, stirred something deep within him, a spark of intrigue, even if it came wrapped in layers of moral ambiguity. Victor, though a man of principles, recognized that the machinations of power often required navigating treacherous waters, and he wasn't entirely opposed to the prospect of shaking things up if it meant a chance at reform. Yet, while the grand designs of power reshuffling and secret alliances swirled in the background, a more immediate and perplexing act of villainy troubled both men: the kidnapping of Sharon and Phyllis. To the untrained eye, these abductions might have appeared as calculated acts of terror. However, the two women, neither bearing influential ties nor holding significant sway in Genoa's intricate power play, posed a puzzling enigma. Dumas's letters hinted at their abduction, but even he could not fully explain the rationale. Some speculated that these kidnappings were nothing more than a ploy, a dramatic, high-profile event to announce his emergence as a force to be reckoned with. The abductions would serve as a headline, a moment of chaos designed to capture the city's attention and establish his notoriety. Victor, whose intuition had long guided him through the labyrinth of Genoa's criminal underworld, began piecing together the dual nature of Dumas's agenda. On one hand, the letters exuded a promise of transformation, an audacious plan to reshape the city's power structure by removing the established pillars of influence like Jack and Jabot. On the other hand, the seemingly irrational act of kidnapping two unimportant women suggested that Dumas was also testing the waters of public reaction. A calculated spectacle meant to signal his arrival and to unsettle both the citizens and the powers that be. It was a dangerous game, one that walked the fine line between revolutionary strategy and outright terror. Despite the unsavory nature of Dumas's methods, Victor couldn't help but feel a certain excitement at the prospect of such dramatic change. There was an undeniable thrill in the idea of turning the tables on the entrenched systems of power. In his own way, Victor had long been a renegade, a man who believed that true justice sometimes required unorthodox means. As much as he abhorred the notion of kidnapping and needless violence, the prospect of dismantling an outdated order, of watching the old guard crumble before the dawn of a new era, was tantalizing. In a series of clandestine meetings and midnight rendezvous, Victor and Chance, the latter, a reluctant but dutiful stand-in for the police chief, began to track the ripples emanating from Dumas's machinations. Chance, despite his limited resources and authority, brought a different perspective to the table. While Victor was enthralled by the potential for upheaval and radical change, Chance remained focused on the core principle of justice. To him, the kidnapping of Sharon and Phyllis was an act of senseless cruelty, an indefensible breach of the social contract. Their abduction was a stark reminder that even in a city ripe for change, innocent lives were being sacrificed for the sake of spectacle. For Victor, the conflicting nature of Dumas's strategy was both an opportunity and a challenge. His correspondence with Dumas continued, each letter laden with double meanings and subtle provocations. Dumas argued that in order to ascend to power, he needed to break away from the conventional methods that had stifled Genoa for so long. His vision was radical, a complete overhaul of the city's leadership, starting with the elimination of key figures like Jack and the influential Jabot clan. To truly rebuild, one must first dismantle the old, Dumas wrote in one particularly audacious letter. Only then can Genoa rise anew under a force unencumbered by the shackles of outdated loyalties and old money. Victor's response was measured and cryptic, laden with the weight of a man who had seen the cyclical nature of power and chaos. Change, when born of fire, leaves scars upon the city's soul, he replied, hinting that while the allure of transformation was undeniable, the cost of such upheaval might be far greater than anyone was willing to accept. Yet, deep within him, a part of Victor resonated with Dumas's radical ideas. Perhaps, in a world where the old order had failed so miserably, an unconventional approach was precisely what was needed, even if it meant temporarily aligning himself with a man whose methods were as dangerous as his ambition. The tension in Genoa grew palpable. As the days wore on, rumors spread like wildfire through the narrow alleys and upscale neighborhoods alike. The public was divided. Some were seduced by the promise of radical change, while others recoiled at the thought of innocent lives being used as pawns in a power game. Sharon and Phyllis, though seemingly insignificant in the grand tapestry of Genoa's political landscape, had unwittingly become the poster children for the chaos that had gripped the city. Their fate was a constant reminder that beneath the surface of every grand political scheme lay the potential for human tragedy. It wasn't long before Victor and Chance, driven by their shared commitment to justice, resolved to take decisive action. The plan was clear: if Dumas's theatrics, including the abduction of these two women, were indeed the prelude to a more extensive and dangerous power grab, then they would have to be stopped. Victor's resolve was unwavering. He would not allow the scales of justice to tip irreparably in favor of chaos and terror. Yet, there lingered a nagging uncertainty. What if Dumas's actions were merely a smokescreen for something even deeper, a convoluted stratagem designed to test the mettle of Genoa's protectors? As night fell over the city, Victor and Chance prepared for the confrontation that could redefine Genoa's future. Victor's inner conflict was as turbulent as the storm clouds gathering above. Part of him was intrigued by the potential of a new order, one that might finally address the deep-seated corruption and stagnation that had plagued the city for decades. But the moral cost of such radical change weighed heavily on him. Could the promise of a reformed Genoa justify the bloodshed and suffering of innocent lives? And was it wise to consider aligning, even temporarily, with a man whose ambition was as monstrous as it was magnetic? The stage was set for a dramatic showdown. In a shadowy warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a known haunt for those who trafficked in secrets and subterfuge, Victor arranged a meeting with an informant who claimed to have inside knowledge of Dumas's next move. The informant, his voice trembling as he recounted hushed details of clandestine gatherings and coded messages, confirmed that Dumas planned to strike again. His next target was ambiguous, but the timing was deliberate, a calculated moment designed to destabilize the city further and to send a clear message to anyone who might dare oppose him. As Victor absorbed the information, his mind drifted back to the letters exchanged with Dumas. Each letter was a chess move in a high-stakes game, a mixture of overt challenge and subtle invitation. Dumas's words echoed in his memory: to achieve greatness, one must be willing to dismantle the past, even if it meant casting aside established allies like Jack and dismantling venerable institutions such as Jabot. But beneath the ambition lay the disturbing reality of his methods, the calculated cruelty of using unsuspecting individuals, like Sharon and Phyllis, as stepping stones to power. Victor knew that once the truth about the kidnapping surfaced, there would be no negotiating with Dumas. The law, represented by both him and Chance, would come down hard. And despite any inner conflict he might harbor about the radical changes Dumas envisioned, Victor would not, allow innocent lives to be sacrificed for the sake of spectacle or am.